This story is based on true events. It is Ponsiano's experience in the year 1950 in Naga Camarines, Philippines. At this time, Ponsiano was only 18 years old. They lived at the foot of Mount Malapuno because their parents owned land there. Although it was far from the villages, it was not a problem for them. Living in that place was much more enjoyable. All their needs were met for free. They had many crops in the area. They could do anything they wanted on their land. If they wanted to play all day, they could do so without any inconvenience. Not to boast, but their place was really beautiful. Before reaching their house, you would pass through a small flat area like a children's playground. It was also safe because every 2 days, his father would patrol to check for holes that could house snakes and pythons. When they had no work in the fields, they would gather together to clear land for planting sweet potatoes. They did this routinely, providing them with a comfortable and prosperous life. Just imagine, even without money, they did not need much. Whenever they were hungry, they had many animals to slaughter, along with fruits they could harvest at any time. Due to the abundance of resources, they were far removed from the activities of the villagers, who, during the dry season, were busy stockpiling food. I am not saying Ponsiano's life was better. I am simply showing the difference in their way of living compared to others. At the age of 18, he had a secret he had not yet revealed to his family. In fact, he had been hiding it for a long time. According to him, 5 years ago, he met an old man who lived behind a mountain. They became acquainted because the old man helped him when he got lost in the area. According to Ponsiano, around 1 in the morning, he saw a golden goat on the mountain, which he immediately followed. His father did not know about this because they were busy praying and reflecting on their sins. As a child, he thought he would be lucky if he caught the goat. But in following the creature, he did not realize he had gotten lost in the mountain. When he reached the center, the creature disappeared, along with all the sounds he had been hearing. The village, which was visible from where he stood, suddenly vanished. Shocked by what happened, he immediately tried to head back home. However, after 2 hours had passed, he still had not returned home. He felt he could not move forward on that mountain. Because of this, he began shouting for help. He went to various places, but he kept being brought back to the spot where he first realized he was lost. By 3 in the afternoon, Ponsiano was exhausted from walking. He was extremely worried because he knew that if nightfall caught him on the road, something bad would happen to him. Several hours passed, and he kept trying to move downward. But the longer he did this, the more he saw strange creatures. According to him, in his entire life, that was the only time he saw such things. Aside from flying fabrics, he also heard sounds that seemed to be calling for help. Sometimes, he encountered headless priests carrying incense. One of the most terrifying things he saw was a giant worm with centipede-like limbs. But as the creature approached him, he saw that its feet were actually human hands. Its head was composed of various human faces, each crying and begging for help every second. As he was about to lose his mind, he saw an old man carrying a basket on his back. The old man approached him and touched his head, whispering, "You cannot escape from here. Follow me if you want to go home." Hearing this, Ponsiano did not hesitate to follow. For him, it was the only way to escape that place. After a few minutes of walking, they arrived at a small hut behind the mountain. The path to the hut was so overgrown that he was sure it could not be easily reached by anyone who got lost. As they sat near the door of the hut, his eyes widened when the old man grabbed a bird and bit its neck. After that, the old man poured the blood into a small glass and drank it calmly. He seemed like an innocent child in front of him. When the old man swallowed the blood, Ponsiano noticed his eyes turn red, which quickly disappeared. Soon, as silence returned to the surroundings, the old man began sharing various things with him. According to the old man, what he had done was a form of magic. He confessed that if he had been a few seconds late, the goat would have taken him into the darkness of the mountain. He firmly stated that the goat he saw was a mischievous fairy. It was called Tagan, which means fairy of darkness in the language of shamans. The old man also mentioned that it often captured mountaineers who got lost in Malapunyo. That was how the fairy increased the number of creatures under its protection. The old man added that among all the fairies in the world, only this one had the ability to forcibly take humans. The fairy did not do it directly. But because of its abilities, it could accomplish things that remained impossible for other fairies. The old man explained that this was one of the reasons he lived in the mountain. His entire life revolved around stopping Tagan and its legion of warriors, all composed of dark elements and their skinwalkers. According to the old man, during the harvest nights, you could see them on the mountain top, like a flock of birds. They would cover the entire sky before attacking the nearby villages. Everyone under the power of Tagan was given a cloaking ability. Unless it was broken by the power of Tres Picos Roma, no ordinary human could see them. This was one of the alarming things about these creatures, which the old man informed the shamans living in the villages near the mountain. When Ponsiano heard this, he could not help but think about the old man's stories. At first, he thought they were just tales. But before he was sent home that night, the old man showed him countless skinwalkers waiting on the branches of a large bolete tree in the middle of the mountain. Because of what he saw, he confirmed that the old man was not lying. From that day on, he wished to see the old man again to gain knowledge about forbidden magic. He realized he needed to learn to protect his family in case the skinwalkers attacked them. Sensing his desire, the old man decided to give him a map to easily locate his place. In the following days, Ponsiano secretly studied forbidden magic. Over the years, he admitted that he learned a lot. He also could not deny that in their place, he was the only young man with extensive knowledge. If you think about it, Ponsiano was uneducated because he did not attend school, but in terms of forbidden magic, even a master had nothing on him. What was more surprising was that he kept it a secret from his parents for years, without them knowing anything. This worked in his favor, as he could still do what he wanted without raising suspicion. He thought their happy days would continue, but then they encountered a severe problem. For some unknown reason, their crops were suddenly plagued. Their animals also got sick with a disease they could hardly cure. When Ponsiano learned about this, he immediately advised his father on what to do. Unfortunately, he was not listened to. His father might have thought he knew nothing about such problems. Realizing he was not being heard, he decided to return to the old man's house for advice. Ponsiano only wanted to know one thing, and that was the cause of the plague spreading in their area. When he arrived at the old man's house, he found him making tobacco. Upon seeing him, the old man quickly called him and said, "Oh, my boy. Why have you returned? Did you leave something behind?" Hearing this, Ponsiano immediately shared all his grievances about his family's problems. Because of what he said, the old man quickly searched for a book related to plagues. He believed that it was not the ability of the fairy, but rather the power of one of its minions. After half an hour of searching, he finally found the book containing various types of creatures on the dark side. According to the old man, it was his dictionary whenever he forgot something. While searching, they discussed the events. The old man added that even though there was no immediate threat to their family, they needed to prepare. It was not unlikely that the creatures would attack them for food. He also mentioned that the fairy was expanding its territory, so it was not unlikely that it had claimed the foot of the mountain. It did not care if people lived there. Anyone who hindered its plans would be buried without a trace. Upon hearing his master's story, Ponsiano felt deeply worried. Fortunately, noticing his concern, the old man patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry. I won't abandon you. Besides, you're like a son to me. I consider your family as my own. Maybe it's time for them to meet me." Because of what the old man said, Ponsiano couldn't help but smile. Aside from that, he had long wished to introduce the old man to his parents. After their conversation, they quickly prepared their things. Before sunset, they quickly made their way down the mountain. A few minutes later, they arrived at Ponsiano's house, where two shamans were performing a ritual around their crops. When the old man saw this, he immediately shouted at them, saying that the ritual would have no effect. In other words, they were just wasting time and needed to leave. But before they could finish, the shamans, filled with anger, quickly argued with the old man. They did not believe that someone from the forest would know more than they did. This is where the story becomes interesting. When the old man finally revealed his true identity, the entire place fell silent. All that could be heard was the cawing of crows and the howling of wolves. He removed the veil from his head, revealing his true face. He showed them the book he was carrying, which had a list of beings on the dark side. Before they could react, the old man quickly drew a symbol on the ground with Ponsiano's blood, which he had taken earlier. After that, he placed the book on top of the symbol, causing the ground to tremble. Because of this, the shamans fell to the ground, begging for forgiveness. Ponsiano's family did the same. Because of what happened, the old man felt deeply sorry for them. He immediately assured them that there was no need to be afraid. He also mentioned that he was not an ordinary human, but an immortal and the father of the shamans in the village. For a long time, he had lived in that place to maintain the balance of power between light and dark forces. If it weren't for him, the mountain would have been taken over by evil fairies. This was also the reason he lived in that place. He added that if they followed his advice, they could still avoid the impending plague. Because of this, the family and the shamans immediately complied. The first thing he asked them to do was to create a wooden fence around the crops. He instructed them to use a special type of wood to drive away the creatures. The shamans immediately followed the old man's advice and quickly did everything he said. After just an hour, the fence was completed. As a result, the plague on their crops gradually disappeared. From that day on, the family became close to the old man. Every night, he visited their house and taught them forbidden magic. At first, they thought he was joking, but when they saw the power of his magic, their perception changed. That night, the old man told them that the creatures on the dark side could attack their house. Before they left, he shared that he would do everything to protect their family. Because of the old man's assurance, Ponsiano's family felt relieved. In the coming days, they would no longer worry about the fairy and its minions. Because of what he said, the old man immediately searched for a book related to plagues. He believed that it was not the ability of the fairy but the power of one of its minions. After half an hour of searching, he finally found the book that contained various types of creatures on the dark side. According to the old man, it was his dictionary whenever he forgot something. While searching, they discussed the events. The old man added that even though there was no immediate threat to their family, they needed to prepare. It was not unlikely that the creatures would attack them for food. He also mentioned that the fairy was expanding its territory, so it was not unlikely that it had claimed the foot of the mountain. It did not care if people lived there. Anyone who hindered its plans would be buried without a trace. Upon hearing his master's story, Ponsiano couldn't help but feel a deep sense of worry. Fortunately, noticing his concern, the old man patted him on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry. I won't abandon you. Besides, you are like a son to me. I consider your family as my own. Maybe it's time for them to meet me." Because of what the old man said, Ponsiano's face lit up with a wide smile. Aside from that being what he was thinking, he had long wished to introduce the old man to his parents. After their conversation, they quickly prepared their things. Soon, before sunset, they quickly made their way down the mountain. A few minutes later, they arrived at Ponsiano's house, where they saw two shamans performing a ritual around their crops. When the old man saw this, he immediately shouted at them, saying that the ritual would have no effect. In other words, they were just wasting time and needed to stop. When the shamans heard the old man's shout, they immediately stopped, showing signs of intense irritation. As they approached them, one of the shamans quickly rebuked the old man, telling him not to interfere with what they were doing. But instead of responding, the old man drew a dagger hidden in his clothes and thrust it into the ground. After doing this, he instructed the shaman to pull it out. "If you can pull it out, we will talk. But if not, you will follow my will." Of course, not wanting to be embarrassed, the shaman immediately grabbed the dagger and tried to pull it out with all his might. However, while doing this, he noticed something under the ground, as if hands were holding onto the blade of the dagger. When his companion noticed this, he tried to help, but the same thing happened. No matter what they did, they didn't have enough strength to lift the old man's dagger from the ground. Because of this, the two had no choice but to leave. They felt a deep sense of shame. To alleviate even a little of their shame, they needed to leave Ponsiano's place. When only the three of them remained, the old man began to explain. His father listened because he also felt that the old man with them was not ordinary. In their conversation, they discussed the beings that had brought the plague to their home. According to the old man, to achieve such ability, the fairy collaborated with witches. Their current situation was just the beginning of what they would experience. After explaining things, the old man advised them to prepare for the coming nightfall. After a few more minutes, once they had closed all the windows and doors, they waited quietly inside. They paid close attention to every sound. Eventually, they heard things being thrown against their walls. At first, they thought it was just coconuts falling. But when they noticed the frequency increasing, they started to peek outside. When Ponsiano looked out into their yard, he saw 4 witches floating above the ground. They were carrying buckets from which they were getting the black mud they were throwing. When the old man saw these creatures, he approached Ponsiano and said, "Stay calm, those are not our enemies. In a little while, you will see what I was telling you about earlier." Hearing this, Ponsiano waited patiently. Eventually, he saw 3 young men about his age. When he saw the redness in their eyes, he realized that these were the ones the old man was referring to. "Son, prepare yourself. Those demons are part of the right hand of the fairy. They are like me, but their knowledge is not as deep," the old man speculated. Hearing all those words, he could hardly speak. The extraordinary things he witnessed about the old man were gradually becoming clear. At first, he thought drinking blood was just a tradition of the old man, but it wasn't. Despite what they had learned, he decided to cooperate with his master. After a few more minutes of hiding, they were forced to come out. As he closed the door, he immediately noticed the old man's skin turning dark. His eyes turned red, and he grew sharp fangs. He also heard the cracking of bones as the old man drew the dagger from his waist. After the old man revealed it, Ponsiano immediately drew the sword given to him. He also wore the pendant the old man had gifted him, along with whispering to the river charm embedded in his right arm. After doing this, he saw the young men drawing their whips. As he stared at them, he saw them charging, so he met them with all his might. Soon after, as the whip slashed, he dodged and struck at his enemy's shoulder. However, before the blade of his weapon could land on the creature's body, it was blocked by an invisible barrier. Because of this, the one he attacked had enough time to stab him in the chest where his heart was. The intention was to kill him with one strike, but it failed. Before the knife could pierce deeply, Ponsiano deflected it, causing it to stab his arm instead. Feeling it might penetrate further, he forcibly moved away to dodge. He successfully did so, but unfortunately, the injury he sustained was severe. Seeing this, the young man he attacked couldn't help but laugh, as if mocking his weakness. Soon after, feeling his body weakening, the old man quickly approached him and licked his wound. As the foul saliva touched it, he immediately felt better, regaining his senses. After that, the old man warned him to be extra cautious because the creatures they faced were not ordinary. They might appear young now, but their combat experience was unmatched. Because of his master's words, he avoided being reckless. He thought he had the upper hand, but before he could take any form against the creatures, he saw them quickly transforming. In an instant, they sprouted long horns on their backs. As their wings unfolded, they immediately attacked the witches standing nearby. They mercilessly devoured those creatures, which further strengthened their abilities. As this continued, Ponsiano began to see the metallic nature of their whips. Their bodies were also enveloped in flames, causing severe damage to their crops. After they revealed their true forms, the old man didn't hesitate to order him to retreat. Upon hearing this, Ponsiano quickly withdrew to observe what the old man would do next. Soon after, the old man grabbed a handful of earth and pulled out the corpse of an unrotted woman. He had no idea how a body had appeared there. All he knew was that they had dug that place many times. As the old man stood the body up, it transformed into a creature similar to the three young men, but superior in all aspects. According to him, the three young men's forms were nothing compared to his master. After transforming, the old man let out a terrifying roar that caused his siblings inside the house to lose consciousness. His father nearly collapsed from the weakness in his legs. After that, the old man immediately attacked the three. Grabbing one by the neck, he bit into it without mercy. When the other two tried to help their dying comrade, he quickly stabbed them, causing them to lose their lives. In just a few minutes, he defeated them effortlessly. Seeing the dead three young men, he devoured them until only bones remained. Once he finished, he quickly approached Ponsiano, transforming back rapidly. As he looked at him, he smiled while whispering, "This might be the last time we see each other. I won't involve you in the troubles I will face in the future. I've consumed 8 out of the 10 minions of the Hidden One. Once I complete the 10, I will be as strong as that fairy. I'm sorry, but you are no longer part of the war I seek." With those words, the old man quickly spread his wings and flew into the sky. After the events, exhausted, Ponsiano went inside the house to rest. He spent several days recovering from his wound. When he regained his strength, he returned to that house. However, upon arriving, he found the house in ruins. He couldn't find the old man anymore, so he eventually stopped searching. Years passed, and Ponsiano faced many battles in that place. He also became a charm maker, always sought by their kin. To this day, he remains puzzled about the outcome of the war between Ponsiano's master and the hidden fairy. If you like this kind of story, don't hesitate to like this videos and subscribe, and I really appreciate if you that. Thank you until next story.